Welcome to Stampscaping 101. This is a video that I've kind of talked about the theme of in various lessons before, but I thought we'd do it another time. It's one of the things that is one of the tougher concepts to kind of come across. But once you get it, it's really easy to employ the methods that I'm going to show you in order to achieve the results that we're looking for in terms of visual depth. Okay. Now, one of the things I've talked about before in videos, various videos, maybe not for the entire theme of that video, but just talking about various areas within the scene that I'm working on, is the aspect of visual space. Okay, so this is a scene, stamp sketch that I stamped out some time before. It was probably, I don't know what it was about. It might have been for the sedge filler right here or something like that. But anyways, what we have is a composition here that represents, if it was a location in real life, that location over there would probably be 25 miles away from here, at least, I would say. And the distance between the bottom of this mountain to the top could be, I don't know, it could be 9,000 feet for all we know. It's probably above the tree line, so who knows, maybe it's 14,000 feet high or something like that. So starting at, I don't know, 7,000 to 14,000 feet, so something like that, okay? But one of the things that people tend to come to scenic stamping with is an idea that's kind of more about shapes in terms of distances. Okay, now what do I mean by that? Let's take this area down here. Let's say that there's this little pond, and let's say that this is the card right here. Okay, now we have the horizon line like this, and we have mountains like this, okay? And there's a little house right here, or a barn, okay? We'll just make it into a little house or something like that. And we have foreground like this, okay? Okay, now instead of seeing this space down here, this grassy area, okay, and meadow, open meadow area, instead of seeing this distance right here to this distance as being something akin to, I don't know, maybe a mile in distance or something like that, the top of that grass right there probably wouldn't reach the top of that, you know, the base of those mountains. You know, there's probably a hill or something like that. Then you're going back, you know, miles and miles into the distance to get to mountains of that size. But this space in here between just this point and this point, it's seen a lot of times as not being any different, okay? So what people often do, let me just grab a pen here, an alcohol pen, is they're thinking about this in terms of being the same thing or representing the same value, okay? So what people often do is they come in here like this, okay? And they'll color this area completely uniformly, okay? Like so. Same values, yeah, I don't know. This is just on some just cheap copy paper, so imagine there's not too much of a change in values like that, okay? And then, okay, with something like this water down here, in relation to those distant mountains, the distance between the foreground, or the front of this pond, and the back of it is not going to be too far, but nevertheless it represents some distance. Maybe it represents 25 feet, or something like that. It could be 10 feet or something of that sort. We have this horse right here as kind of a visual reference to, you know, what size this pond is. If I had that, you know, horse way in the background, this pond would represent probably something a lot larger due to perspective. Okay, but anyways, let's take a look at the water right here. The water is often seen as the same shape. It's not seen as distant right here. What they're thinking about is this shape right here. So what we do is we fill it in accordingly as so. I call this kind of like a coloring book type of notion of coloring, okay? Or inking. And that can be done, you know. There's nothing wrong with that, okay? But oftentimes people wonder why their scenes don't look quite as dynamic, okay? And it's because, let's go into these mountains right here, okay? So we're coloring in the same mountains right here, the same exact value. And then let's hit this little structure right here, okay? The whole thing is just being colored in like this. So coloring book types of coloring, okay? People might add in some variations here and there a little bit, but it's kind of minimal, okay? And when we do things like this, and there's a kind of innocence to it. It's more kind of children's picture book or something of that sort. There's not a lot of, you know, deep space in there. Things are a little bit more condensed. In this case, it's more like a stained glass or something like that. You know, very flat and not representative of any kind of distance or deep distance between this space and this space and the top of this mountain to the bottom of it. There's not really any difference in terms of the different volumes of the house right here, or in this case, you know, in this one right here, it'd be a barn. So in the structure right here, I've colored in and stippled in the side of this to represent that side like this, so you can see it on the inside of the structure as well, okay? Things are going back in perspective, in three-point perspective, but the different angles, just like my hand here, you know, if I go like this, or if I go like this, you can see, you know, it's lighter on the side because it's being top lit and darker on the side. So that represents distance. So changes of value will give you your distance. You can look at it anywhere, like this pad right here. I can go like this, and you can see the side of this is a different value than the top part. And the top part right here might have a different value of that. You know, just depending on the different angles you have. So sometimes when people have kind of something stamped out and it represents something white, sometimes they don't color it in at all. But you can see, you know, with any type of white surface like that, there's going to be different values depending on how light is hitting it. This is more distant than this right here. Okay, so how do we translate this notion of depth into a scene like this, okay? I'm going to give you a super easy way to think about it, okay? Or to execute it, okay? All right, so you don't have to know anything about lighting or whatnot, okay? You don't have to overthink this type of process right here. All right, I'm just going to go with some simple color schemes right here. I'm going to go, for the most part, blues in my sky, blue in my pond. We'll hit our grass with some greens. And we'll hit that barn with some browns like that. We'll kind of give it a relic type of looking color scheme. All right, so over all these things right here, this is not related to this video theme right here, but I'm going to give everything a base coat, a uniform base coat, okay? Now that's not going to affect distance. I just, you know, if I don't give things, you know, some degree of uniformity in terms of my colors that I use, things look a little bit kind of disconnected, okay? So this is just some antique linen. It's a pretty good base coat to lay down here. It's a warm tone, and it's fairly light in value. And I like to use pretty light values for my base uniform colors, or base coats, basically. Okay. All right. Okay, here we go. I'm going to actually come into my water with this one too. You can see I came up to it in my sky. We used to do this type of thing with oil painting in my beginning oil painting class when I was going to school years ago. I don't oil paint now, but I remember some lessons that we learned. Just kind of giving our base, canvases some kind of general color scheme. Usually it was some kind of warm color scheme, like a little bit of a sepia or something like that. And then we started painting over it. In oil painting, you can go opaque, so you might not even be able to see the surface in the end, but it kind of provides a little bit of a base coat to start things off with. Okay, let's get into depth and distance here, okay? Very uniform and flat looking in terms of distance here. This color right here is the same, or this color and value of color is the same value as right up here, okay? Let's start off with that green here. All right, so how do we do this here? Let's bring in some greens into this, okay? All right. Okay, I'm not worried about going into that pond a little bit. Okay, this is let me see, this is bamboo leaves. Oh no, pear tart, sorry. It's just a kind of a yellow-green. Okay, now watch this now. Oh, I'm working through these 3 values of green right here. Started off with this one. Now let's go to the bamboo leaves. It's just a darker tone, okay? Now I didn't plan out carefully this type of color scheme right here, okay? I just went with, I don't know, kind of a light, medium, and dark. It's not my go-to, green color scheme for grass or anything like that. Okay, but here's what I'm doing now, to some extent. I used a little bit more of that up there than, maybe I should have, but... Okay, now what we have here is I used a lot of this bamboo leaves, kind of going from here. I went all the way up here to the tart with the pear tart, okay? Now with this bamboo leaves, I kind of came down here. I added a little bit of the bamboo leaves because I don't want a harsh line right here. I want some of it to translate to, what's the word I'm looking for? Transition, sorry. I was thinking translate. Okay, so I wanted to transition up here a little bit. I don't want a harsh line of bamboo, and then just pear tart up here, okay? But down here, this is where I'm going to keep my darker area. Now you can do this completely the opposite too. It could go dark up here and transition lighter down here. It doesn't matter. Or it can go dark here, lighter here, dark here, lighter up there. Doesn't matter, okay? What we're looking for here are variations though, okay? And that's what's going to kind of represent depth a little bit more, okay? Maybe I'll do that. Here, I'll add some green right here, okay? Some of this darker green. This is now Cottage Ivy, kind of a Christmassy green. It's not too yellowy. It's more kind of a neutral green. Okay, and we'll see how this looks right here. Let's add a fairly deep application of it down here at the base. I'll add some of it right on this barn. At the base of the barn, not on the barn. Okay, so anyways, let's see, let's vary it a touch more. I'll make it a little bit darker in some areas and a little bit lighter in others, okay? By the way, I'm just using a paper towel. You can use whatever you want. I was talking with someone, they were talking about It's like if you don't use a certain type of product, you know, it's like you get shamed or something like that. I'm thinking, really? If you don't use a certain type of product or a certain type of brush or something like that. Oh my gosh. I hope that's not the case. But anyways, a little bit more distance here, okay? It transitions up right there. I've left a little bit lighter here, there. Now this looks kind of weird right now, I know, because it's only the grain. But let's bring in the same type of concept now with some other colors. Let's go with the blue tones right here. What do we have? Light, medium, dark. Okay? I usually start off with my lighter tones. I mean, with the mementos, they're so kind of thick and they really blend really easy on glossy cardstock. Now, this is not a glossy cardstock technique right here specifically, okay? You can use this same type of concept with any media you're working in. Value doesn't change. It's not like if I'm working in chalks or something like that. Lighting would be different, okay? You can vary your values of your different hues used in different areas with any type of media that you happen to be working in, okay? Now see, I'm bringing this blue, I'm bringing it into the mountains as well, okay? But I want to change the value of some of these mountains too, okay? I don't want them just all neutral. Light is hitting them differently in different areas. Let's come down here into the grass too with this blue. Okay. Blue is a component of green. You know, you add a little bit of yellow to it, and you have green. Okay, so let's go down here in this pond. Okay, let's try to not keep this pond a completely uniform value of blue. Okay. It doesn't represent super deep distance or anything like that, but let's add a little bit of a top. You can add it down below too, or whatever. But I'll show you how I kind of leave it a little bit streakier, okay? And varied. Do you see that right there? And let's get a little into this water, or grass as well. I'll try to leave a little bit more discernible streak. It's hard to see because this blue that I'm working in right now is really, really light. But you'll be able to see it much more distinctly when I get into my next color of blue. I think I need to re-ink my summer sky. Sometimes it's hard to tell because it's just the ink itself is so light in value. Okay, Bahama blue, we'll be able to see much more distinctly the value change of this, okay? So let's come right across it here like so. See that big change right there? Okay. Let's use it down in this foreground in the grass as well. I don't necessarily want blue grass, but I might want it to be kind of a darker version of grass. See the grass right there? It's getting a little bit darker now. But look at that pond, okay? There's more variation here. I kind of give it a little bit of surface light because it's reflecting light up above. And it has more character to it than this one, okay? This one's kind of cute though, you know, but it's like a coloring book. But see how we're already kind of achieving depth in here? It's like light is kind of hitting this area down here. You could have had it light here and darker in here. But what we're doing is we're oscillating things. What do we have here? Dark, light, dark, light. Okay? And that's all it means. Doing lighting and developing lighting is not more work. It's less work, right? Because when we get into those other colors, what we're doing is we're coloring less the darker we go. Now that's just kind of a general statement. You know, it's not like, oh my god, I colored in all my pond. You can vary the grass or, you know, the mountains and things like that. It doesn't have to be, you know, something so firm, okay? That's like the exact opposite of what I'm talking about here. You know, that's what you want is just some variation It's like variety is the spice of life, you know. And we're talking about when it comes to lighting as well. Now look at this mountain right here. If you ever go out in the mountains like this mountain ridge, if I color it all the same like this, okay, what we're saying is that mountain is basically on the same plane, okay? It's completely uniform. There's no distance between here and here and here and here and here and here, okay? It's all being lit the same way, just as a flat piece of paper towel is, okay? So there's no variations in this. Light is hitting it. This is all equal distance, okay, from this to the lights. But look, let's take a look at this right here. See, if I kind of tone out, you know, a certain part of the mountain like that and leave the other part light, this mountain right here, for all we know, could be a quarter mile or 2 miles or 3 miles from that part, okay? So we've suddenly given this image right here tons of depth just by doing something like that, okay? What is that? It's just varying the amount of ink that you use on it. Let's play around with those mountains just a touch more. Let me go with the gray right here. I kind of like how those mountains kind of developed there, okay? Let's just take this. This is I'm using the gray on the mountains just to create a little bit of variation between the mountains and the sky, so they're not just, you know, blue mountains or something like that, just like the sky, okay? You can color with you know, alcohol markers as well. That would be a fantastic media on here. Well, let me bring some of this gray down here in the foreground, okay? See how I just keep doing this? I keep creating those relationships between certain colors that are used and the other colors within this color scheme. Now, that's not part of the lesson either. It's about distance, okay? But what I'm doing here is with these darker tones like this, I'm using it in the darker areas, okay? Now, it doesn't turn this foreground down here gray. It's just a little bit of a darker looking green, right? How about a little bit in the sky like this, too? Let's vary the sky a little bit, okay? It's about restraint, but it's not about specifics at all, okay? See, if that mountain was light and this one was dark, it's not like it's different. It's like, you know, when you go out in nature, it's not like no light ever hits that background mountain. But from a visual sense with you as your lighting director in a scene, you're just, you know, varying your lighting. Okay? If you look on a stage or something like that during a, you know, a production of something, chances are it's not going to be lit exactly the same. Okay? It's like our house or something like that. You know, we don't have the same amount of light everywhere within a room. Okay? You have different lights in different areas. Okay? So that's kind of coming together a little bit, you know, in terms of our coloring and lighting. Now, was this hard? It is if you're always used to filling in everything. But what it does is you just change, you know, the amount that you use of other tones within this space, okay? Now what I teach to people too is sometimes they get this already established on their scene, okay, not on a drawing. But what I talk to them about, now this is going to look really rough, this is just some copy paper here, but sometimes if they don't vary things like that, and it looks really flat, it means it's void of lighting, scenic lighting. What you can do is they can come into it, okay, and add in some variation, okay, into their pieces, okay, that have already been done. Okay, and remember that green didn't necessarily look like a, you know, a very light green, but when you add a darker green into it, what happens? That green that was laid down before suddenly looks very light, doesn't it, now? By contrast, let's take a look at these mountains right here. Okay, I don't have any kind of definitive types of formations on here, but let's see what I can do here. Okay. Okay, so let's see, we have something like this going in here now, okay? So we have suddenly a little bit of variations on the mountains like that. And in this completely uniform structuring right here, okay, so we have a little bit of variation in here, okay? And what that does is it represents distance because lighting is hitting it differently, okay? So, even if you've gone all uniform in here, you can still do all kinds of different things. You just kind of add those darker tones in certain areas. Now, if you've gone really dark in there and it's hard to add anything darker, maybe you're just going to turn it into a night scene or something of that sort, which you can still do. Okay, so let's get into this right here. Let's see if I can hit this area right here. Oh, I didn't finish with the blues. We went to a Bahama blue right there, and I got into my gray. Let's go into the Danube blue right here. The Danube blue is a little bit darker. It's kind of more of a, I don't know. I wouldn't call it navy. It looks like it on the cap right there on the lid, but I've never found it to be terribly dark, especially if I'm applying it the way that I am right now, kind of wiping it in there like that. Okay, let's hit a little bit of that in the water as well, and what do we do? Let's hit it a little bit more in this foreground right here, okay? Okay, all right, let's see. Let's see if I can address that barn there. The barn, sometimes doing like smaller structures like that, it's just easier to use a alcohol pen to color in, but let's hit that with some desert sand. It's just, I don't know, it just happens to be a little bit of a brown tone that I have in my collection in terms of mementos. You can use your distressings like a walnut stain or whatever. Or barn could be on any, number of colors, okay? All right, so that's a little bit of that. Desert sand was kind of real similar to antique linen. Let's hit it with the rich cocoa. Okay, okay, now with the lighter color, I colored in pretty much the whole thing. Okay, but let's hit this with some rich cocoa. See, rich cocoa I thought would be much darker too, but it's not very dark at all. Let's do something. Let's have it top lit from the lighting, scenic lighting. Let's bring in some of this into the grass as well. I often like using browns in my grasses. I think it gives them a much fuller look. Okay, richer look. All right, so there we have it there. The roof looks a little bit too bare, doesn't it? Let's give it a little bit of another tinge or tone. This is just some alcohol inks right here. Let's hit it with, I don't know, what color is this? Maroon. Do I want that? Let's try to use a little bit. Go underneath my eaves maybe, or something of that sort. Make it round. Lighter tone. Go and kind of spread that around. It's like a blender pen when you go back into a lighter color and just kind of spread out the darker colors. Okay. Use some of this too, here and there. Apricot. Okay. All right, so anyways, now I could finish this off more, okay, with things like highlights and whatnot, and that would represent a little bit more distance and whatnot, value changes, three-dimensionality. Let's try something right here really fast. Let's take this real pale. It's not that pale. I'll add in this little bit of streak of some other colors in here, okay? I'll add it up here in the sky as well, okay? There's a little bit of a lavendery look, and then I'll just kind of blend that out a little bit. It kind of removes something too and kind of makes it a little bit more mellow, but I'll show you what this does right here. It just kind of creates a little bit of a relationship between sky. It's a little tinge of that pink up here, and it just changes it down here. But even, look at this little space right here, okay? It goes from a light blue, kind of a little pinkish tone, where the pink overlaps some of that blue right there. Creates a little bit of a violet, and then transitions into blue right here. This is just in this one little space right here, okay? So we get into something like this. This is really flat like that, but you can really give some character to just a small space like this. Let's take a look at this. Take a look at the green space right here, okay? And let's take a look at what's happening here. This is totally different than this. And then transitions right here. This is a little bit of a different green than this right here, right? And then as we start moving up in the horizon right there, it gets very light. Okay, now there's, like I said, there's all kinds of different ways you can do it. It could have been light here, it could have been dark there, but the thing is that there's a little bit of variation here. Here's a little bit of a darker green, and it goes right here where it's right on the edge of this pond. It's a little bit of lighter green. I didn't plan for that, it just happened to be that way, but I left it there. I didn't color it completely uniform all the way there, okay? That's not planned or anything like that. I just didn't color it, okay? But I'm not going to go and fill it in and make it completely uniform because I think it just looks better that way. Let's do something right here too. Let's go in with some alcohol pens, okay? Let's take this shoreline right here and make it a little bit of a deeper green, okay? See that right there? Isn't that look great? Just kind of giving that edge a little bit more distinction. It's too harsh right now, but just go into your blender pen and just blend that right in there, okay? So see that? A little bit of the shoreline right there has a little bit more character and definition right there. So we varied in a very, very thin, subtle way the edge of that shoreline right there and a space that's, I don't know, not even a 1/4 inch up right there. It's like 1/8 of an inch right there. So see this little bit of a harsher line? Take a look at it when it looks like from distance. Doesn't it look more varied like that? Like light is hitting it in a different way. So just in a very micro way, it's not microscopic, but just in a very small way, the difference between here and right there is different in value. So we're varying our values a lot here. That looks pretty good. Let me make the edge or the base of that barn a little bit darker, okay? So I've darkened that in, and I'll blend it out a little bit like that. I think that looks, that looks quite a bit better to me. And it's just a very subtle thing. It's just a little bit darker there, a little bit lighter there. See the distance between, or the difference between that and that is a little bit different. It's different from here to here. That's different from here to here. So what are we talking about? We're just talking about variety, okay? See how the grass is its own kind of character going on. It's really fun. The mountains, too, have a different kind of characteristic to them. They could have looked all completely uniform, okay? Like this. Well, I gave it a little bit more definition like that. But that's basically what's going on up here. Let's tweak it a little bit more, okay? Now I'm using some pens here. Let's just change this a little bit right here. Change it here. You can just kind of go along too. You can kind of reiterate my shading that I have in all of my designs. You can kind of add some more shading to those shadow definitions. They call that rendering when you're drawing something and designing something. When you start to go into The definitions of shapes, forms, and textures within a design. We're talking about rendering, and it's, kind of defining based on the knowledge that we have of those forms like that. So you always want to have, if you want to have depth in your scenes, try to find a design that's been really nicely rendered, okay? In terms of visual space, perspective, texture, and lighting that's inherent in the design. Otherwise, you're going to have to add that all in yourself. Okay, so there's the mountains there. Now those mountains kind of have their own character in terms of your lighting in there, okay? Looking at the sky up there too. There's a little bit of a blue. Can't really see anything at all. It's because it's lighter than that blue that's already up there. Oh boy, do I want that. Maybe not. I'll use it in some of the darker areas like that. I'll go like that. Just a little bit in there. I'll just take this pen, right, this blender pen, and I'll just kind of blend that in. So I'll get a little bit of a tinge of that top area of the sky, like so, okay? So, anyways, what you get here is you get a scene that represents visual depth by the way that I've manipulated and transitioned values, okay? They're colors right here, but there's values within each color, okay? So in each type of region, if we're going to have something that's blue in a scene, try to have a kind of a light, medium, and dark, okay? If you have something that's going to be brown, try to have some lights, mediums right here, like a walnut stain. I didn't use it in here. Rich cocoa, antique linen. It's kind of light-like and dark, but that Memento Rich Cocoa really isn't very dark at all. It's more medium. Light, medium, dark, green. And what you're doing, basically, is your darkest colors. You're not using them as much, okay? They're kind of more in the shadow areas and whatnot, okay? Now, I wasn't going to do this, but I can't resist. Let's just go in here and add a little bit of a highlight here and there, because this is kind of lighting too. I use this for textures, like this could represent like little flowers or something like that, but going in here like this, what are we doing? We're varying the light within these different areas too, right? How we, remember, like in these areas right here, we're varying our use of darker colors, like shadows, okay? So you have some areas where there's darker shadows, and some areas where it's kind of more in the light, okay? Well, that could be the same with highlighting like this. Highlighting can be an area, but a much more detailed, very specific area, where we are introducing light into it, okay? So it's varying the values in very specific little, I don't know, in this case it's little dots, okay? See that right there? So just in a really small clump of grass, what you're saying is, some of them are kind of standing out like my, I don't know, like my fingernails or something. Here, my fingers, okay? Those fingertips are basically like the same color as down here. There's blood in them right here because I'm holding this, but see how it's like lighter up top right here on my fingers, and then it's darker down below. Well, that's all these little kind of highlights are representing here, okay? It means they're just varied variations, okay? And let's go into, let's see if I can zoom in a little bit more here. Let's go into like this little ridge right here, okay? And add some highlights on that. I'm not going to add it into too much dark areas, okay? I'm going to add it in the areas where it's still a little bit light, otherwise this white kind of stands out a little bit too much. But look at this. See, I'm kind of varying even the lightest of areas where there's a very light part of it, okay? And then there it transitions into kind of the less light areas, okay? So I don't know if you can see that right there on the top of that. That's a little bit wider than down here, right? White? A little bit less. Okay, let me see if I can zoom in or show you a real close up here. See that white right up there? So this area right here to this, if we were on that mountain, this could be 200 feet or something like that. You know, a 20-story building in terms of distance. So we're not, again, we're not thinking about it in terms of a flat space, okay? We're thinking about this very differently, and lighting can hit these areas much differently than other areas within that same object or space, okay? See a little dot right up there or something of that sort. I don't know, it could represent snow or something like that. I just see it as highlights or, you know, that type of thing. So anyways, that's how you represent distance right there. Vary your use of values, and just in a very simplistic way, don't color everything completely uniform. See this right here? This darker green? I put on the brakes. I didn't use it in this area. This mountain right here, by not coloring this part of the mountain, that color and that amount of ink, it just looks like so much of a more distant portion of that mountain range, okay? It's more of a range than just a flat object. And this one really looks very distant in the background by having it toned out, okay? So, again, it's just kind of getting used to it. When you get into your medium and darker tones, just don't use them quite as much and retain some lighter areas. And what that really means is, in terms of a usage standpoint, it means doing less coloring, okay? This is an easier concept in that we fill in everything uniformly. Now I added a little bit of depth in here, but in application, it's really doing less work, okay? And a little bit more thought, but it's not doing a whole lot more thought. It's just like, don't color in everything completely uniform. And it doesn't matter where it is again. All right, so anyways, that's my little lesson on lighting for distance, okay? Or to represent distance within a scene. Okay, if you have any questions, drop me a note in the comment section. And I hope this video came in handy for you. I think this is a really kind of good thing to practice. And when you stamp out your compositions, just think about each area. In this one, it happened to be grass, water, structure, mountains, and sky up here too. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different things. Vary your use of lights and darks in each one of these areas. Dark, light in the sky, darker, lighter in the mountain, darker, lighter on the structure, in the meadow, darker and lighter, and in the water here, darker and lighter. Okay, I have decided that instead of ending my video just doing one example of scenic depth, I'm going to do some speed coloring here, I guess you can call it. And we'll do it looking at all these other stamp sketches here, or using these different stamp sketches here. We have 5 cards, and hopefully by the end of this video here, you'll really get kind of a good indication of just how easy this type of concept can be here, okay? Now, I'm not going to talk about this too much because I already covered that in the first part of this video, but what we're going to do is we're going to just do some mass kind of production style coloring. I'll go through these different color schemes on these different compositions here, and we'll just take it from there. Okay, so on this one right here, we have an area of sky. Okay, that's one area. Grass and trees could be the same type of color scheme. I could make that fall foliage, reds, yellows, and things like that, and that could be a separate color scheme. But let's just, for expediency's sake, let's just kind kind of hurry through this, and I'll make this all kind of spring type of greens right here. And we'll go back into blue down here, okay? These things could be sunsets or things like that, so, you know, just because something is clouds doesn't kind of limit us to, you know, a certain type of notion, okay? The sky has all kinds of different personalities. Okay, I have summer sky here. Let's make it easy, though, and fast. Okay, I'm going to go with some tumbled glass re-inker fluid here. If you use re-inker fluid for your first color, your base coats, it makes it so much faster. Okay, just a wadded up paper towel. People cringe at this notion here, and sometimes they say, oh my god, I used that and it was so hard, I can't get the hang of it. But I would really suggest you try that again. I mean, if you can go like this, you know, or like this, I mean, you can use this. I mean, I don't know, you know, it shouldn't be hard. Okay, so these different regions here, we have sky, grass, water, and mill, okay? All right, so filling in like that, all right? Let's just put this in the grass as well, okay, because we'll add green to blue, and it won't look blue anymore, it'll look green, okay? But look at this, we're going to keep some areas of each one of these 4 areas lighter than some other areas of it, okay? All right, so see this right here? See how I've just kind of left a little bit of light up here? There's some light in here. Well, I haven't colored this blue, but... And there's light down here, and there's a little bit of light in here. I didn't save too much light for in these tree areas. I mean, I could have, but I didn't. It's not for any particular reason. I'm just going to vary things, okay? Where it ends up lighter, you know, and darker, it doesn't matter. Okay, this is just the first color. Let's do this in kind of that mass production type of process here, though. Okay, so see this where I've kept it light in here. It's not all dark everywhere. A little bit lighter up here, a little bit lighter in the grass, a little bit lighter in the water, but the other areas are kind of filled in. Okay, so it just means don't color everything in. Okay, here we have sky, mountains. Okay, those are 2 different areas. The sky really is a very small area in this one, though, right? So I don't have to have like the equal amount of kind of lightness in every section. Okay, what do we have? The cabin right there is a different section, right? Or a different color scheme. Okay, here's the grassy area, okay? It could be very, you know, dry grass, too. It could be brown, if you want to. Oh, and then we have the path here. I like to leave lead-ins, though, things that, kind of pathways and things like that, a little bit lighter. Okay. But do you see here? I'll even put a little bit of that blue on the cabin just to expedite it, but here it is. A little bit of light in the sky still, a little bit of light in the mountain, light in the cabin, a little bit of lighter areas in the grass, and lighter area on that pathway, okay? So I didn't color everything in, okay? This one's really easy right here. What do we have? We have 1, 2, 3, 4 areas. It's clouds there, but I don't consider those clouds to be the same ones as these ones because these represent clouds that are much closer to us than those ones in the distance there. How do you treat those? Well, you treat them the same, but you just vary your lights and darks, okay? Now we have this big open space right up here, right? We could fill it in equally, okay? But it's just a little bit easier, more interesting, I think, to vary it. Because that, you know, maybe there's areas in the sky that are closer than others. And see that little negative space up there? It means that the area that I didn't color it in, maybe that could be a cloud or something like that. Or just, you know, different atmospheric types of, I don't know, conditions in that area. Okay, same thing as mountain right here. We'll leave it a little bit lighter in some areas, but here, let's go in these clouds. And we'll color in some of the cloud areas. And we will leave the other areas as is, okay? So doesn't that look like a little bit of a deeper space now? We have lights and darks. lights and darks in this area, lights and darks in that, third distance, and then we have lights and darks in, the most distant area, okay? This mass production thing, it really is fast, and it really is easy, but I don't know. I don't like working on so many scenes at once, but I just want to make a point here. This is just a tiny little piece of paper towel, too, okay? All right, so we have sky, grassy area, but this grassy area, it's just like that. This one right here, you want to vary the distance a little bit, or a lot, okay? This grass down here is much closer than the one back up there. You could leave this one light down here and dark up there. You can go dark down here and light up there, okay? Just as long as there's variation, okay? So you see, the whole point of this is that, we're talking about distance, and we don't have to kind of have things like super, figured out, calculated, in other words. You just don't just treat the whole area as one flat space, okay? Like this whole grass is to be colored in equally, you know what I mean, with the exact same value. You just change your values around, and it looks more distance because light is hitting it in different areas. All right, this one's going to be an easy one right here. Moon, I think that's just going to be kind of a nighttime type of thing. I love this color scheme right here. I mean, we're talking about it's very minimal, but minimal doesn't have to be boring. It could be very rich, okay? So we have sky up here. Well, there's clouds, and then that distant cloud of moon looks a little, is probably more distant. These other clouds are in the foreground. And then we have this visual lead-in right here. But look at this on the design. See how it's darker down here? Darker around right here? It's being kind of an observer of your stamps, okay? And imagery. I can color in. Let me do this right here, up here first, okay? Here's what I'm doing right here. Here's my little trick right here. On the clouds that are a little bit more distant than the moon, I color those in a little bit darker, okay? So now, and you don't color out all the moon, all the clouds, okay? You leave some of them, like they're capturing the light, okay? See how I left this one light? And this one's a little bit darker over here. I mean, if this one was lighter and this one was darker, it doesn't matter. But see how I put some right here too, this ink right behind in here? You can do this with chalks. If this is on a matte paper, you can do it with alcohol pens if you like, using alcohol pens, markers. Okay. But here, let's go back down to this area right down here. See that this is a little bit darker in certain areas, okay? I just darken those areas. I have a lot of the answers in terms of coloring choices. For the most part, see, I'm taking this ink and I'm putting it in the darker area of the clouds. Okay? Like that. I've already described a lot of the lighting within the designs themselves, okay? But remember, that cloud that I've drawn, it's really tonal. Here it is right here. But remember, it's not a cloud like this, okay? Where we take it and say, okay, there's a cloud there, and we just color the whole thing in uniformly like that. It has different nuances in here in terms of value. And there's ranges of value. There's lighter areas, there's darker areas. And it's not so much, you don't have to be like super gingerly with it. I'm just taking this ink and I'm hitting it into the darker areas like that. And in the lighter areas, I just leave it as is, okay? But look at that distance right there that we've created just within that space. And this is just with one color so far. Okay, so let's go down here. I like to leave my visual lead-ins a little bit lighter. That includes things like waterfalls with falling water, rivers, creeks, definitely pathways. Pathways are the most kind of definitive visual lead-in. Okay, so that was one color, okay? So far. Let's go on. Let's jump up to like a Bahama blue now, okay? maybe I'll get, okay, I'm going to skip here. I'm going to go to Danube Blue. I don't want this video to last forever. Or I don't even know which ones I started off with first. Well, okay, I think it was this one. I don't have to do these all in order or anything like that. Okay, so let's just go to the Danube Blue. I would recommend going with, you know, something like an intermediate color, but we just want it to get the idea across as far as transitions, lighting transitions here, okay? And the oscillation between light and dark. That means you're kind of flip-flopping. It's like checkerboarding. You know, you go light, dark, light, dark, light, dark, okay? Now with your darker colors, you just don't color in quite as much. Don't worry, you know. I mean, I could make this a, you know, a nighttime scene and make it all blue, but I can add green to that blue right there, and it'll become green if you want it to be grassy. But here we go. You can see the lights and darks more definitively here now, can't you? In the sky, this section up here, we have darks and lights. This area down here, in the grass, there's, you know, light, dark, light. Here down here in the water, dark, light. I like to kind of anchor my structures down a little bit with a little bit more tone, okay, at the base of them. Let's go back to this one right here. Okay, now see how I've added this lighter tone around here? Let's go into the darker tone. Kind of stay with those darker areas, okay, when you're hitting it with a darker ink. Sometimes people lose their light when they get into the darker tones. They work fine with the lighter ones because the lighter ones are lighter to begin with, so if they add it everywhere, you know, they still have light in there. It's with these darker tones people go a little bit overboard. They color everything again, and it's like, oh my god, I lost my light. Well, if you do that, then just kind of hit some of the darker areas with yet a darker color, and the color that they went over it with will seem that much lighter again. But do try to throw, you know, put on the brakes a little bit, and kind of, you know, take a good look and see how that's looking. But look how much deeper that space is just by using that darker color, okay? And we'll reiterate this. See, I'm hitting this little kind of slope right there with some darker ink, okay? In some of these finer areas, it would be easier to come into it with like an alcohol marker or something like that to get in the detailed areas here. I'm not going to, I'm not going to say I'm not going to bother doing that, but I don't think I will. I might, I don't know. I can't resist once I start seeing these scenes developing, and you know, I just want to add let me add a little bit more to this one. If you can get darker using more of a certain color, do that before you jump on into your next tone, okay? All right, see that coming around? We have a lot of visual depth work in here. This one's real similar to that watermill one in terms of composition. We have that sky up here. Okay. Anchor down the chapel right there. I'm kind of hitting some areas. My paper towel is starting to fray a little bit. It's the cheapest one of the cheapest applicators you'll ever get. Although, I don't know, my color box stylus tools were cheap too, but that's because I used mine for 15 years, probably. You know, before I had to change the tip out. If you still have some of those, use them. You don't have to use them gingerly, but just don't scrub with them. They'll last you a really long time, okay? All right. Variations, light and dark in here. Light and dark up there, and there's different light and darks throughout here. I go, you know, say there's a little bit of light, you know, dark down here and dark over here. All right, hopefully that's kind of creating some visual distance for you that you can see because of that variation, okay? Hitting this mountain right here. This one would be a good one. I could still stamp a moon up there if I wanted to. This one would be a good one as moonlight, wouldn't it? You do a moon up here, and like a Santa going across. I don't have a Santa in the Stampscapes line, but if you had a little Santa on a sleigh taking off from the North Pole, maybe, I don't know. This isn't necessarily the North Pole with that big mountain back there, but could be. All right. See that right there? Hopefully that creates some good visual distance. Everything's not colored uniformly. We still have our shapes of our clouds in there. You know, this is a darker color than I stamped out my cloud in, so gotta make sure that I don't eradicate all of that. All right. Okay, create some variation within that mountain up there. That would stress some people out, you know, by coming in to the mountain with the same color that I'm doing the sky with. A lot of people want to mask that off and do that a completely different color, but you can do that, and that does look good, and it has an interesting look to it when you really separate your things, but you don't have to, you know, as you can see here. And I'll show you how all this comes together in terms of different color schemes within these pieces. All right, so that's all the blue right there. And like I said, it's not the richest blue possible because I only use 2 different blues, and none of them are, you know, neither one of those are terribly bright. The Bahama blue is a little bit brighter, and that would bring some, you know, a little bit more kind of excitement into the scene. But we'll take a look at it. It should be fairly rich, though, as is. Okay, let's hit it with some grassy areas. If there's going to be some grass, let's hit it with some pear tart and maybe go Cottage Ivy. Let's just go 2 colors. If I'm just doing one scene and I want it to look, you know, as rich as possible, I'm probably using, I don't know, 3 or 4 colors. Well, I guess I have the blues down here, so I guess that'll count for something. All right, so pear tart. All right, now I did change from this tip right here to this one. Okay, I'm putting it into this grassy area. Don't worry, that's not going to be the final color. It looks really hot and kind of warm, you know, crazy right now. But that's not the final green that I'm going to use in here, okay? All right. I mean, it doesn't look bad. It doesn't look good, though. But that's not the final color. This is where people kind of stress out sometimes. It's like, oh my god, that doesn't look like, you know, like this. Well, you know, it's not going to if you don't, you know, use the same colors that were used in that other one, you know. Or they hit it with the first color and they think, you know, with the first color, and it's like if there's like several different colors in it, they're kind of stressing out because it doesn't look that way, okay? But you just kind of develop it like this, okay? Now, here's what you're going to do too. This is a really light green right here, so I can go into my lighter areas, like the areas where I've retained some of that white of the card, or just lighter areas. But try to avoid blotting all that out, you know, when you go to your next tones, okay? So in other words, we're going to come into this area with like a light green and a dark green. Don't, you know, don't lose your lighting still, okay? Retain that light area. And it's more so with the darker tones, okay? You're kind of regulating your use of medium darker tones more than you are with the lighter ones. The lighter ones you can kind of put all over the place, but the lighter ones are kind of the ones that establish kind of your lighting scheme, so be careful of those. But we're not on those darker colors yet. Okay, no grass in this one. Grass in this one, but it's more moonlight, so I'm going to leave that one as is. Okay, so that was pear tart. Just kind of a light green, you know. You can use, I don't know, what is that distress green? The distress green is a really good one. Yeah, I don't have it right in front of me right now, but something like that. This one is the Cottage Ivy. Okay. Hitting that in these grassy areas. Okay. Sometimes you can kind of pinch this off a little bit more to make it a little bit more narrow to use. Okay. All right. Get something like that. This one right here. When I go over my grassy areas where there was a lot more blue, okay, this kind of gets rid of that bluish tinge to it. But the blue really gave me a head start, right? And blue relates to green, so it just, I don't know, it made it much faster and, you know, quicker for me to do my green region down here just by utilizing that blue. You know, just a little bit of kind of blending knowledge in terms of color mixes, what mixes to mix into another color. So blue and yellows, you know, mix to form green, or just green on blue will look more green than blue. So see, when you do that right there, I mean, I can't, to me, there's not really a big hint of the blue that was used in here, okay? It's, you know, for the most part, it's not like, oh my God, there's a bunch of blue, sky blue grass or something like that down there. You know, it's not, you know, something that, you know, is going to be apparent as far as what you used underneath a certain color. Okay, so, but here we have the retention of light. See this right here? It goes dark, light, dark, light, dark, like that. You're just oscillating things, and that gives it distance and space. If you took out all those lighter areas and had it all this color, can you kind of imagine all these areas here being that color of green? It would flatten out that space and it wouldn't look so distant, right? Okay, that was the green. There's a couple areas in here that have some brown. Let's throw in a couple of distressings. I know a lot of you like or love distressings. Let's do that. Okay, let me just change this right here. There's my quick change applicator, right? Easy to do. Okay, we have that right here. This is a walnut stain. All right. Are we going to color completely uniform our structures? Or do we oscillate the light and dark on them? Well, just like all the other spaces, I would oscillate my use of tone, okay? I put a little bit up on that rooftop, okay? So I kind of put it a little bit more on the side of the cabin, so it seems more like volumes, okay? Not a flat space, okay? See that right there? Doesn't that look a little bit more dimensional? So we have distance on this, but we also have kind of lighting and whatnot, okay? So instead of coloring for color, you're coloring for distance. And what happens? If I color that whole thing all brown, it would look flat. So this coloring for lighting and distance, it's less coloring because I didn't color everything in, right? All right, so there we go. Hey, that brown, now I'm using it here. Let's use a little bit of brown in the grassy areas. I like a little bit of a more of an earthy kind of green in my grassy areas, okay? But do you see this right here? Why that's a little bit of a different tinge than over there. So you just don't color everything in the same, and it looks different. Okay? I love browns in my greens. I think it looks really good. It doesn't look brown, although you could do, you know, you could do summer and fall in California, and you know the hills are going to be brown, okay? But see that right there? There's just a little bit of different tinge right there, and look at that. That's where the brown kind of came into more of just straight white. But doesn't that look kind of a little bit nicer? It looks more full, I guess, and complete, okay? Yeah, you can put some up on your mountain if you want to, too, or something like that. You know, just to give it something a little bit to relate to down here, if you want. Oh, let's use some of it down here on this pathway, but are we going to color up that pathway completely uniform? No, just add it somewhere and don't add it in another area, okay? So see, I just kind of did it like that. But see, isn't that better than just having that whole thing colored uniformly up there? It could use a little bit more, but, you know, I'm just saying, making a point here of, you know, just changing things around a little bit, okay? See that right there? And then just use maybe a little bit of a lighter version up there. See that like that? You can even put some shadows down here at the base of these two people walking down here, hiker and child. A marker would be easier. I mean, you know, just using a little tip of this right here like that. All right, so see that right there? Lights and darks in the sky, lights and darks in the mountain, lights and darks in the cabin, lights and darks in this, lights and darks on the pathway right there. It looks like a deeper space. And I'm not even doing, there's a lot of other things we can be doing to this thing. These scenes like this, I really like the use of things like white pigment ink, paint pens, gel pens, all that type of stuff looks really good in this these types of pieces right here. Let's go into black, okay? I could go with, you know, a darker blue on this too. I mean, we could go into more colors, but again, I just want to push things a little bit faster here just for the sake of it. All right, so I'm just adding some black onto this. I'm just using the same brown area because, you know, the black is a little bit more stronger than brown, although man, I can see some of that distressed brown in there. Maybe I will change. All right, this is an inexpensive applicator here. You know, there, I'm changing to a fresh area right here. This is like a quarter piece of paper towel that I'm doing for, you know, all of these scenes right here. Okay, so see right here. Oh, this would be better if I added in a little bit more of a darker blue into here, but look at this space being created right here. Okay, we need a little bit of a transitioning blue. That's like a harsh black next to kind of a medium blue. So I'm going to go back into this with a transitional blue, meaning a blue that's a little bit closer to black, okay? Making adjustments on the fly right here. And I would normally have done that other blue before too, but I just want to kind of expedite the process right here. But I also want these things to look really good too. Okay, but you can see where I've added that tone down here? So these areas look more rounded like that, okay? Because it transitions from dark to light up here. All right, let me hit this with some more of this blue here. Let's go to, oh, let's hit it with this Marvy blue right here. All right, let's go, okay, while you guys don't have Marvies, let's hit it with the Bahama blue. Okay, all right, here. Okay. Remember, retain your lighter areas. I can retain my lighter areas. I can, you know, I can utilize restraint of coloring everything out, okay? Now this isn't a real dark blue, but it's a little bit of a brighter blue, okay? Wouldn't this be a dramatic kind of setting to put some figures on, you know, walking up the road? Right there. I don't see this moon as being, you know, spooky or anything like that. If I did it all in black, it would have more of a kind of an ominous feel to it, you know, but this blue is kind of more tranquil to me. Okay, here it comes. A little bit more like this, okay. This would be great with some foreground trees in here. Look at that. Doesn't that space kind of pull you along and it looks more distant, you know? The areas of the sky that moon is kind of set back from the clouds, you know, from what it initially looked like, okay? It was set back a little bit visually because I do have a lot of tone inherent in the designs, but yeah, look at that. Okay, we're on this one right here. Okay, maybe I won't use black on this one. The clouds are, real kind of light and delicate, so, I stamped them out in a very light blue, so maybe I won't use black on this in terms of filling in some additional tone. But this Bahama blue, this brighter blue, is kind of expanding on the intensity range of the piece, so I think that looks a little bit better. But anyways, doesn't that look a little bit more kind of like a deeper space, that looks more distant back up there, and that looks separate from this in terms of spacing. Clouds look like they're kind of more rounded and made out of volumes as opposed to, flat like that or something. Okay. Okay, I couldn't resist. I needed to go in here with a little bit of a brighter tone. Okay, but this isn't taking too long. I'm doing like several scenes all at the same time, and it's, adding one more color to 5 different pieces. It's, I don't know, maybe 5 minutes, maybe 1 minute a card for an extra color. That's expanding on that range. It's expanding on the value range. Okay. And it's expanding on the distance, the visual distance within those spaces. Okay, so anyways, there is that. Let's go back to that black now. In some of these areas, I think that black will be really effective in showcasing this idea of distance. Okay. I'm not sure if my black is a little bit dry. It's not dry. Sometimes the pages get a little bit moist, so when you get into your, I don't know, 4th or 5th color that you're adding into it, it's like you're adding wet ink into kind of a damp card already, so the ink doesn't transfer as much. But that's good, though, in many ways, because it makes for smoother color blends, too. Okay, so anyways, I'm going a little bit darker down here. Okay, so doesn't that space down here look a lot more distant now by having different tones down here, different values and ranges like that? See the side of this chapel right here? Well, in the design, it's subtle, but I've made that side a little bit darker, so I can tone in this side with some additional ink. It's not going straight out of the ink pad like that. Okay, it's kind of adding like a very dry version of this thing. See how these paper towels work really good? Okay, so I'm hitting it in those shadow areas. But now look at this right here. Doesn't that side of that chapel look more distant than the front of it because we've varied the values on here? You can hit that chapel with a little bit more kind of specific coloring too. With your your markers, and go into it with your markers and blend and add some additional tones in very specific areas, like underneath that what do you call it, the pediment or whatever. What were those parts of I don't think that's a pediment there. But whatever that's called, that part that kind of sticks out, Okay, so anyways, see this right down here, how I've kind of toned that down? It's a little bit darker down here. So doesn't that look a little bit more distant by having this area darker here? Let's hit that side of that cabin right here. This is the cabin with fence stamp. Let's put a little tone on the side of it like that. Okay, doesn't it look more kind of volume based? How about let's set this cabin a little bit more apart from that mountain, so maybe at the base of the mountain. Behind the cabin, I'll make it a little bit darker, like this. So see, doesn't that cabin kind of stand out a little bit more by having the area right behind it a little bit darker? And then you can darken at the bottom like this, and it makes that, the majesty of that, peak up there seem a little bit more distant, higher in elevation. Okay. Retaining the light areas, when I hit, I'm going into these with the, the darkest color that I'm using. I'm not going into my lightest of areas. Okay. Now I've already done this one, but the ink's dried a little bit. Let's make it a little bit darker on the couple corners right here. The darker you take some areas of your scene, the lighter areas are going to seem. So sometimes if you've made something way too dark, it's like, oh my god, I lost my light. Then stamp something real dark and somewhere in your scene. It doesn't have to be, anywhere specific, but, if you stamp something nice and dark, it'll make something else that's lighter than that, even lighter in, from a visual standpoint, okay? All right, hitting some of these trees, underneath these trees, making them a little bit darker. It gives your trees a little bit of opacity by saying that they cast shadows. So it's right here at the base of the watermill. You kind of have a little bit darker. It kind of makes the watermill kind of sit in the scene a little bit more. And something like that. I really like using markers to do stuff like that. You can hit it with some markers. See, underneath these little awnings, I've made some areas of the design darker. And you just look at the design and see where those shadows are, okay? And then, ooh, that's a little bit too dark. Then you go into it and you just reiterate what's on the design itself, okay? So the Stampscape stamps, I've given a lot of head starts to things because I tone things and I add shadows. I try not to add shadows too much because I want the artist, the stamper, to be able to interpret what they're doing. So if they have a lighting scheme coming from one side of the scene, I don't want that lighting scheme to be so ingrained in the stamp design that you can't change, your lighting direction. But I do want some in there. And I try to make the lighting somewhat neutral. Okay, but see there, it's right in here. So I'm coming into the darker areas of the designs like this. Creating some additional shadows like that. It makes the distance from like base to the top of the design a little bit different. Okay. These are just your standard alcohol markers right here. And I'm going with some fairly light ones, okay? This one's kind of like a neutral olive brown. It's a little bit warm. It's not too neutral, but you can use it with warm tones, cool tones, and it looks pretty good. Alright, so see that right there? A little bit of extra little touches like that. And blues, I mean, you can come into some of these darker areas and get into these really specific areas on the mountain, where it's kind of hard to do that with, this. So you just kind of follow along these areas that I've kind of described, those volumes and distances with tone. They call it stippling. Okay, so anyways, that is that. Maybe I'll have a video on using your gel pens, paint pens, that type of thing for additional highlighting and whatnot. But here we have these 5 cards. I was going to say, where did I thought we had 5. So we have really complete colored cards here. Okay, now I'm at the 41-minute mark, okay? So that means that these ones were all done. Some of these, require a little bit more because there's different color schemes going on. These ones are only one color scheme, okay? But that's basically 8 minutes a card like that. That's going through, I don't know. Let's see. On these cards, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I'm going to use some walnut stains. That was like 9 colors, okay, on each card. 8 minutes card. That's like less than 1 minute per color for any one of these. I mean, these ones took a little bit less time because of the, the monochromatic nature of it. But again, you can have, several different color schemes working in these things, and it doesn't take a whole lot of time to do that. All right, but going back to the subject matter of this video here, all these areas like this, the retention of your lighter areas when you're coloring, okay, not coloring in everything that's grass on these areas completely uniform. You see that here, from right here to right here, it's a little bit different. From right here to here, underneath the trees, over here. I mean, like I said, if this area was light and this is dark, that's not wrong. So you don't have to know anything. You just have to kind of put on the brakes. When I'm just coloring these types of things like this, okay, I'm really not even thinking about where I'm going to retain light. It's just, as I'm scribbling along, I just put it somewhere and I just don't put it in another area. Okay, now here's the big difference in terms of the thought process that goes. And I've been telling people this recently. I don't know, sometimes I don't think about it, but this is what's happening. When you're doing coloring like this, okay? Let's say I'm coloring something like this. Normally when you're coloring in some kind of, space like this, okay? We are looking at the ink that's being applied, okay? When we're coloring something like that, all right? But now, when I'm coloring for lighting, okay, when I'm doing this, when I'm bringing this in like this, I'm looking at the area around where I'm applying the color. I'm looking at the lit area. So when you're coloring in blue into this, you're applying blue, but look at the space, the lighting that you're retaining when you're doing that, okay? So this could be markers too. When I'm doing this right here, yeah, I'm looking at, where this marker is being applied in here, okay? But I'm also looking at this light area, so that I can retain the light area, okay? So I tell people to, have their kind of point of focus, maybe not on one or the other, but on both, okay? So as I'm applying some tone into this right here, like this, I'm looking at the light and how it's changing the light. When I apply dark, how is it looking up here in the light area next to it, okay? So equally focus on that space. Here it is right here as I'm bringing in tone like this. Yeah, I'm looking at that streak as I'm going like that a little bit, but I'm also looking at this in the same kind of glance. I'm looking at the white here when I'm inking, the cloud up like this. I'm looking at the white area like that as I apply the tone, and I'm retaining that. That's how it's easy to retain your light areas. It's when you're focused on the light areas, when you're applying your inks into it like that, okay? Not 100%, because you have to see where you're applying something, but, your point of focus is now in 2 spots instead of on 1. When you're coloring something in, you don't have to, and you're not really worried about lighting. You can just kind of fill in the area like that. So it's a little bit of a different kind of point of focus when it comes to Coloring for lighting and coloring for lighting is coloring also for distance, okay? And it could be something that's this cloud to this cloud, which would be, it could be 15 miles away from each other or something like that. Or coloring for distance could be from the bottom of this mound to the top of this mound right here, the distance of 5 feet. It's darker and lighter up here. This one right here is darker, lighter right here, and it's darker than lighter up here. These are the same cloud stamp used, but I've separated them through the use of darkness, okay, to describe the light. So when you're coloring, watch your lighting as well, and retain some of that light, and by the retention of that light, you'll get a much more varied and rich surface in terms of the oscillation of light and darks, but you'll also be creating distance within your scenes. These are all two-dimensional scenes right here, but they have a look of being much more kind of spatial in terms of distance when you do it like that, and you retain those light areas throughout your piece like that, okay? All right, so if you have any questions, drop me a note in the comment section. Hope this video came in handy for you. And as always, if you have any questions, drop us a note in the comment section or via email. Hope you like, share, and subscribe. And thanks, as always, for tuning into the Stampscapes channel.